record it. So what we'll do is that we'll record the reading and whatever basic comments are there, and then we can shut the recording off after that. We can dialogue openly. So let's do the same thing that we did with chapter 1. Let's go over the whole chapter. And then that way, this chapter, there's no doubt, chapter 2, it increases in complexity. So there's a lot of subtle positions that are taken that have to be paid attention to. Same thing with chapter 3. Chapter 1 opens the way for what we're going to encounter in chapter 2 and chapter 3. Chapter 1 opens up the way. How chapter 1 opens up the way is by laying down a framework of ideas. So the classification system that you see in chapter 1, which the classification system is based on definition. The definitions give us an overall concept of what revelation is. The definitions give us an overall concept. Definitions, when they're brought together into a system and organized, that's how we develop concepts. Mafhum, they call it. So we get a mafhum of what wahi is, mafhum al-wahi, based on classifying things so that they can be identified. So what was classified and identified was the difference between Quran and Hadith. That was organized. Those, what is the difference between Quran and Hadith? And even Hadith itself was classified into 2 types. And so all of those different distinctions that are made by way of definition, defining a thing so that it's not confused with another thing, that's all the framework that's being laid down so that we can go into chapter 2. Chapter 2 in the Arabic is called al-Bahth al-Thani, the second research. في بيان مصدر القرآن وإثبات أنه من عند الله بلفظه ومعناه. And then there's a subtitle for it, or secondary title that is not totally related. It's تهديد الدعوة أخذ من نصوص القرآنية. So here in the first title in the Arabic, which makes it work a little better, is I defined it as the second investigation, clarification on the source of the Quran and establishing that its source is Allah in word and meaning, right? And then the second title is another way to look at it, is basically setting the parameters for the claim based on the text of the Quran. And what is the claim? The claim is what was said before, that the source of the Quran is from Allah in word and meaning. We mentioned in the last time, and even before that, we mentioned that this position is very, even though Sheikh Abdullah Daraz is Azhari and was trained in the way of the scholars of Al-Azhar, to say that the Quran is the speech of Allah in word and meaning, it's a very athari position. It's a very athari position. And what I mean by athari is very hadith based, which I'm not saying is necessarily bad, but I am saying is that it moves itself away from the Ash'ari position, which in the Ash'ari position, the way that they define the Quran, they kind of removed themselves away from saying that the Quran in speech and meaning uh, is the speech of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. That's why they say the Quran al-lafzi. I'm sorry, al-kalam al-lafzi. Al-kalam al-lafzi, or they say, I'm sorry, they say al-kalam al-nafsi. I'm sorry, they say al-kalam al-nafsi. Still a little lagging from sleep. Say al-kalam al-nafsi, the internal speech. And that provoked a series of debates amongst, especially you began to see that in recent times, but not, those debates are not new debates. They're old debates. And that's why I mentioned this. But in recent times, for those people who are studying Aqidah at a more in-depth level, they know that that exists. So you'll find in a simple book like Usul al-Sunnah by Imam, a simple book like Usul al-Sunnah by Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, or is attributed to Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, this issue comes up. This issue comes up in Jawharat al-Tawheed, which is a main basic book for Ash'ari Aqidah. It comes up in the book that's attributed to Imam Abu Hanifa and Fiqh al-Akbar and his explanations. And that one is a little more closer to this. But from the angle of defense of the Quran, Sheikh Abdullah Daraz, he considered that this approach was better, and that's for a number of different reasons that probably will become more and more clear, inshallah, we hope, as we do the study and the reading of this section, right? Why did he select? That's a question that should remain on our radar. Why did Sheikh Abdullah Daraz select the position or opt to define the Quran as being source of it is from Allah in speech and in meaning? Why did he opt for that? Why did he opt for that and didn't opt for what we see influences in books like Jawharat al-Tawheed or other books in Ilm al-Kalam, which defines the Quran as al-Kalam al-Nafsi? Why did he opt for something that is more in line with the first generations? And that's not necessarily to put us into the Aqidah wars, or it's not to say this group is right, that group is wrong, but definitely in this arena of defending the Quran, that position has some significance. Why will kind of, I think it'll flesh itself out, I believe, as we read along, or else we'll have to be more clear, and focus on kind of illuminating or highlighting or bringing light to, what are the reasons why he did that. But I'm hoping that it'll come clear for everyone, but I want everyone to pay attention to that point. So he so he begins the translator, the section with what is the source of the Quran. He completely eliminated. I'm at the top of the page. He eliminated the section that says that is establishing that the source of the Quran is from Allah. He put divine text, divine meaning. That's one of the reasons why we were forced to go back, because we initially started to study this book in the English language, and some things didn't flow, and it doesn't equate. The lack of flow doesn't equate with the status of Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah Daraz, rahmatullahi alayhi. So when we went back, we began to see, no, the author tried to simplify some things, and the translator, I'm sorry, the translator tried to simplify some things, and in simplifying those things, remove some of the internal logic of the book. Here it said it is universally known beyond any shred of doubt that this sublime book, the Quran, was delivered to humanity through Muhammad bin Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib, peace be on him, an unlettered Arab man born in Mecca in the 6th century. This much is not subject to disagreement between believers and non-believers, or Muslims and non-Muslims. No other book or event in history is so universally accepted. So before just reading through, because this is another point that the way that he introduces the sections lays down the foundation for what comes after. The titles are interconnected, and things flow from the title as far as the main ideas, but the foundational concept also is found in the introductory paragraph. Uh, and I'll read it in Arabic. لقد علم الناس أجمعون علما لا يخالطه شك أن هذا الكتاب العزيز جاء على لسان رجل عربي أمي ولد بمكة ولد بمكة في القرن السادس الميلادي، اسمه محمد بن عبد الله بن عبد المطلب صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آله. هذا القدر لا خلاف فيه بين المؤمن والملحد، لأن شهادة التاريخ المتواتر به لا يمثلها ولا يدانيها شهادته للكتاب شهادته لكتاب غيره ولا لحادث غيره ظاهرة على وجه الأرض. So here he's here he's saying that first of all, let's discuss it. We read the English and the Arabic. What idea are you getting from this section? What's the impression that you're getting from this section? It is universally known beyond any shred of a doubt that this sublime book, the Quran, was delivered to humanity through Muhammad, uh, the son of Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, peace be upon him, an unlettered man, really here in the Arabic, an unlettered Arab man born in Mecca in the 6th century, according to the in the Arabic is according to the Christian calendar. But anyway, this much is not subject to disagreement between the believer and the atheist. No
I
other
think,
book or even history is so universally accepted. Okay.
sorry, I was going to say that he's establishing a fact, like a historical fact, and it's something that is agreed upon.
And what kind of impression do you get from that? As a Muslim, as a student of knowledge, as a teacher? The Arabic has another thing. The Arabic has another dimension which he didn't translate, and that's that there's no equivalent as far as testimony with regard to another book or event. So he covered both the Quran.
I think
And
he's
event.
confirming the divinity, like the divine aspect of the Quran.
Where did you get that from?
From him saying, from him, emphasizing that the Prophet ﷺ was unlettered.
That's as a believer, you can claim that. Yeah, the way he talks about the Quran, the way he talks, you're hip to those signals, but would a non-believer agree to that? Because he's saying that
No.
he's saying
Yeah, they refute it, and
he's saying
say that
this much is
from
not
some.
subject. This much is not subject to disagreement between believers and non-believers. So if the divinity of the Quran, so to speak, as you mentioned, is established here, maybe for us it is, but would it be a point of agreement between believers and unbelievers? At that point in time, they would enter into the circle of believers.
Right. Does it have more to do as the existence of the Quran?
Well, that goes back to what Fad was saying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, technically speaking, the translator, in saying no other book or event in history is so universally accepted, he did say it, but he did say event. But here it is more significant when we use the term mutawatir fi tarikh. It's like because that, and this is the issue with the Arabic. He says لأن شهادة التاريخ المتواتر. So it's like it's not just any type of historical transmission. It's a historical transmission that is like not really open to doubt. And the reason why I say not really open to doubt is because yes, you may have some non-Muslims, but that's why he's bringing in Sheikh Abdullah Daraz is extremely crafty. This is the Azhari technique. And there is in the mutawatir concept, you will find in the books of Usul al-Fiqh where they would try to bring in even non-Muslim opinions. That's the level that Islamic scholarship had reached because the Muslims were not intimidated by non-Muslims. So they would try to find overlaps between Muslims and non-Muslims and say, well, this goes even beyond what we're claiming. Like they're with us even on this particular religious belief or this particular position. So we even have their support. It's like right now you find some claims that are made like that, in politics or life, that it's not just one group, but it's like, this is like global. It's a global position, and so they were doing that, and so he's kind of doing that here. This is typical usuli flavor. Azhari is very factual, but it's not just a fact to say that how Muslims get sometimes. We claim things, and we claim it with like so much enthusiasm and emotional commitment that people will believe us based on that, but that's not really scholarly or scientific. So we'll be like, did you see that video? You know, the astronauts, when they went to the moon, they saw La ilaha illallah, and then it'll go viral, and then everybody in the Muslim community will be talking about it, about the tree that, you know, when it was cut open, they found the name of Allah carved on it. And so those things may be emotionally nice and spiritually inspiring, but they're not necessarily factual. They're not factual. So here he's beginning with a reality. And the reality that he's beginning is that there's this human being who's known historically. We know where he was born. We know what his family background is. We know what time period he was born in. We know his name, right? And at that point, and we know that he received something that's called the Quran. Although for us, you know, it is as Muslims, you know, it is a sacred book. But when we say, if you mention Quran and Muhammad today in the world, just without saying Prophet Muhammad, right? Alayhi salatu wasalam. But if you leave it at that level, Quran and Muhammad, and you're not mentioning Quran as a book, not that we believe is a book, we believe is the speech of Allah, but if you mention it as a book by itself, and you mention the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, and you say that, you know, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the Quran, or the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he was known to have transmitted the Quran. No one in the world would disagree with that. Where they disagree with, Aliyah, is your point. Is it a divine book? And then here, the other point of disagreement is, did the Prophet Muhammad والسلام, author the book? Did he author it? You with me or not?
I think so. So what you're saying is confirming, like what Fa was stating about the historical fact that he, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, existed and the Quran existed or exists, and that's
But
that's widely known.
it's associated with the Prophet Muhammad والسلام. Although, the reason why I'm saying it like that is because everything that comes after will be a clarification as to why the Quran is not why the Prophet Muhammad والسلام, is not the author of the Quran. Right? That the source of the Quran is from Allah wa ta'ala. And he's going to look over the Quran itself to show that the Quran itself even testifies that the Prophet والسلام, is not the author of the Quran. But that's a more complicated position to take. But where the foundationally was beneficial for us in terms of teaching children, was beneficial for us in teaching non-Muslims, and even teaching the deen overall, is that this is just something that's not doubted. That the Prophet ﷺ existed, and that he had something that was called the Quran. The believers say that it was given to him by Allah, and the non-believers acknowledge that, he had it and it exists. And at a deeper level, the ones that are more strong in knowledge, they acknowledge that it is not tampered with, it's not distorted. Some of them, like in the university system, some of them, they try to put doubt on that, but even in the university system, nobody's really challenging that opinion. They won't that the Quran is undistorted, but what they will do is maybe doubt from another angle, like doubt from this angle of saying that the Quran is from Allah Ta'ala, source. So now he moves on to the to the core. He says, now the question arises, was Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, the author of the Quran, expressing his own, right there, it's the first, right there at the top, right there. Now the question arises, was Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, its author, alayhi salatu wasalam, expressing his own thoughts, or was it given to him by a tutor? If so, who might the tutor have been? And then here he says a teacher in Arabic. أما بعد فمن أين جاء به محمد بن عبد الله عليه الصلاة والسلام؟ من عند نفسه ومن وحي ضميره, which is, his inspired by his conscience. من عند المعلم. ومن هو ذلك المعلم? So Sheikh Abdullah Daraz, the way he frames the questions, are a little more provocative. So he said, okay, to proceed forward. So from where, yes, now he's establishing the divinity of the Quran. What was the full statement that I made?
Sorry, Chef. I just wanted to clarify, like he's establishing the divinity of the Quran, not whether or not the Prophet ﷺ existed or received revelation, correct?
Right now he's establishing that the source of the Quran, he's beginning to lay the framework for establishing that the source of the Quran is not the Prophet.
Okay.
But
we're all under the same, like we're all in agreement that the Prophet ﷺ received revelation. Like we moved beyond that point, right? Or no?
What do you mean we're all in agreement?
I mean, like, is that the point he's trying to prove in the Quran, in his book first? Like that's the first established point that
the first established point that we came across is that the Prophet existed. He received the book called the Quran. That's a historical fact. That whether he's the author or not is a different issue. I'm not being clear.
No, you are being clear. I'm just thinking about like why he would do that.
Because why he's doing that is because of the questions because basically now we're in the struggle of what is prophethood. Muslims believe in prophethood. Christians believe in prophethood. He's going to have to get into, remember that he had to define the Quran as revelation and then separate it from the Torah and the Injil by definition. Remember that piece?
So he's writing to non-Muslims.
He's writing to both Muslims and non-Muslims.
Yeah.
And showing where's the common ground and where we differ.
Okay.
He's showing where the common ground is between us and where we differ. So Sheikh Abdullah Daraz revolutionized contemporary Islamic studies because this is not a new idea. You find this. I actually, when I was studying Usul al-Fiqh, the principles of research methodology in fiqh, this comes up. This stuff comes up, right? And so some of the brothers, including the sheikh at that time, was like, yeah, part of the necessity of, because there's a claim that we have to update the way that we're presenting usul al-fiqh, right? And so they were saying part of the claim that we have to update, even some of the scholars from Al-Azhar, they wrote books. One died recently, Rahmatullahi alayhi, Sheikh Usama Abdul Alim. I'm giving you the understanding of kind of, you can feel where the Muslim scholarship is at, where they were questioning, why are we talking about the common ground between the Muslims and the non-Muslims? Why are we including them in points of why are they saying that this is an agreement between us and them, or this is a consensus, they're in the consensus? Why are they included? And so I said, hold on a second. I said, this is very beneficial I said this is very beneficial from the angle of comparative religion. It's very beneficial from a dawah perspective, but they didn't see it that way. They saw it as they wanted to clear or clarify what a Muslim identity is without having to discuss with them. And so even if you think about the Israeliyat, are we clear what the Israeliyat are? You know what the Israeliyat are, Aliyah?
They're the Jews, like Israel, like they're the Jews that took their
No,
Shahada, but they
no. It's close, but the Israeliyat. Do you want to? Do you want to explain to her what the Israeliyat are?
I can try. So it is what we take from the claims of the Jews and the Christians from their books. So like from the Bible and the Torah and the Injil. And as Muslims, we are to take it, but without full conviction. Like you take it, but you don't completely believe in it. So sometimes it corroborates the stories that we have, or things that we have in the Quran and the Sunnah, but we don't necessarily believe in their authenticity. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Sheikh.
Right, and so sometimes it overlaps, sometimes it doesn't. It needs at times further research, but it during the time of the Sahaba, they had a filter process, radiallahu anhum, and they would use they knew where the boundaries were because they were the people that were receiving revelation. A lot of times we talk about the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is receiving revelation, but the companions were in the company of the Prophet. And so they were not directly receiving revelation, but they were indirectly receiving revelation. So they were that community that knew things about revelation that maybe the next generations didn't. They had to learn. Like they knew that the Prophet ﷺ received revelation in different ways, in different time periods, when it would take place, and so on and so forth. They knew details. So they had a filter process. But the Tabi'un, those that followed them, they didn't have the same filter process. They began to accept more and more of what it was that was being said by the Bani Israel. They probably felt more comfortable, as well, because they were more established in their belief. So some things were not filtered through in the same way. And so just like what Faz said, we accept it. We have it in our midst. I want to use that term, and it's the transmissions of their things, their statements, their historical claims. We may find them in our books, but that doesn't mean that we just totally reject it or totally accept it. They have to be filtered. That's the general principle. Now, what has happened in recent times, within the last 100 years or so, or a little more than that, there's been a backlash. And so you see in Islamic scholarship a wanting to rid the literature that we're using popularly from those types of stories, even from weak hadith and so on and so forth, so we can get to the core of what can be considered the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ with certainty, and what we can consider Islamic teaching with certainty. Yeah, that was the claim. And so the point that I'm saying is that the point of mentioning these things is that there was a time period where the Israeliyat, they were brought to the table as points of discussions. And that's why you find them in Tafsir ibn Kathir, you find them sometimes even in the Tabari and other books like that. Of course, there's some rules for why they exist in those books. But it's not that the Muslims were trying to find common ground. And the Muslims were trying to find common ground, and the Muslims were distinguishing where it is that we differ. That's just a reality, people. You understand what I'm saying? I think the geopolitical situation has become so complicated that it forces us to have our own identity. It's just like now people go to protests and they say, "Oh, we're going to a vigil protest," and the Muslim now is saying, "Well, we're going to a vigil protest," and then they say, "Bring your candles, bring your this, bring your that," and then instead of just saying we're going to, a protest and we're going to, have prayer there and make it, bring like an Islamic identity component. We find ourselves just our our activists and our youth, they just completely borrow the language and everything that's there from the Christians and the Jews, so to speak, in that regard. And that's why there was that backlash, because people began to see, similar to what you see now, they began to see that there was no filter process. These things were accepted indiscriminately. So the Israeliyat, to be simple, was statements and claims made by the people of the book in the past about religious points, sometimes about the lives of the prophets. And we know, especially when it comes to the lives of the prophets, alayhimussalam, there's a lot of distortion. But you find in the book, like Stories of the Prophets by Ibn Kathir, you find that he attempted to filter, but there's a lot of stuff that's borrowed from it. Because there's some things that we don't have details on, because they're not essential for faith. Those details are not essential for faith. We may look into them, but they're not essential for salvation. Islam communicated to us what was essential, for our practice and salvation, so to speak. Is that clear? Aaliyah?
Yeah, it's kind of like what we agree upon, but we don't take it
No,
like
not what we agree upon. No, not what we agree upon. What we may have common ground on, but sometimes it may not necessarily be accurate.
like the
What?
story. Like
Huh?
when I talk to people, it's like, you know, we, I don't want to say agreed upon, but we both acknowledge, Abraham alayhi
Yes.
salam, and he
Yes.
had a son from Sarah, Isaac.
Yes.
He had a son from Hagar, Ishmael. But then where we differ is the status of these women.
Yes.
We say they were both wives, and they say something else. And so it's like, is it kind of like that, like confirmation that we acknowledge
Yeah,
these
yeah.
people?
There's a common ground that we believe in Ibrahim. You believe in Ibrahim. We believe he had children. Then they believe he had children, but then they don't agree on the prophethood of Ismail, or they say that Isaac was the first, born, that type of thing. Like it's there's common ground, but not everything we agree upon, with no doubt. Am I being clear or no?
So those are the people that are considered people of the book, the Israelites.
No, the Israelites, yes, but the Israeliyat is just a term for knowledge that comes from them.
Okay.
So, I want to begin with this before going into the next section. In the Quran, it's sort of the Takwir. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala says, إِنَّهُ لَقَوْلُ رَسُولٍ كَرِيمٍ ذي قوة عند ذي العرش المكين مطاع ثم أمين وما صاحبكم بمجنون. Right? And then the Quran continues, وَلَقَدْ رَآهُ بِالْأُفُقِ الْمُبِينِ وَمَا هُوَ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ بِضَنِينٍ وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا ذِكْرٌ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So pretty much that's a little more than what's there in translation, right? It's a little more than what's there in translation in the book itself. But what is recited, what is transmitted, I should properly say there, is a definition of what is revelation, definition of what is the Quran. إِنَّهُ لَقَوْلُ رَسُولٍ كَرِيمٍ. إِنَّهُ لَقَوْلُ رَسُولٍ كَرِيمٍ. That indeed it, without doubt, is the statement or the speech that's coming from, that's being delivered by a messenger, right? ذِي قُوَّةٍ عِنْدَ ذِي الْعَرْشِ مَكِينٍ. It's possessing power, right? By the one, or possessing power by the one who is they translate it as the Rabb of the throne, right? The Rabb of the throne. مُطَاعٍ ثَمَّ أَمِينٍ. Obeyed and trustworthy, right? And here he's talking about the angel Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam. وَمَا صَاحِبُكُمْ بِمَجْنُونٍ. And your friend or the person that you're accompanying, your companion, is not crazy, right? وَلَقَدْ رَآهُ بِالْأُفُقِ الْمُبِينِ. وَلَقَدْ رَآهُ بِالْأُفُقِ الْمُبِينِ. And indeed, he saw him in the horizons clearly, or in the clear horizons. Right? He's talking about seeing the angel Jibreel. وَمَا هُوَ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ بِضَنِينٍ. Right? And he does not, and with matters of what is revealed to him from the unseen, he does not withhold. I think flows a little more. And then it goes on to clarify, وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. Neither is what is basically the Quran itself, or what's being revealed to him, the speech of a devil that is outcast. And then the Quran itself right here in Surah Al-Takwir, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ. It has a question, so where are you going with this, right? Where are you going with this? It's causing a point of reflection. إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا ذِكْرٌ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Right, that indeed the Quran is a reminder for all of the creation. And then it goes on to say, the لِمَنْ شَاءَ مِنْكُمْ أَن يَسْتَقِيمَ, for whoever wants from among you to be upright or take the straight path. Right. So here Sheikh Abdullah Daraz, he says, was translated as, we read in this very book, the Quran itself, that it is not the composition of the man who brought it to us. It is described as the word of a noble and mighty messenger who enjoys a secure position with the Lord of the throne. He is obeyed in heaven, faithful to his trust, which is more elaborate, right? This is the messenger. This messenger is Jibreel, or Gabriel, the angel of revelation. That's a common point between the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims, that Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam is the angel of revelation. So Sheikh Abdullah Daraz continues with that, right? And he continues to the point of common ground. This messenger is Jibreel, the angel who received it from God, the wise, the all-knowing. He then brought it down in a clear and lucid Arabic style and conveyed it to Muhammad. Muhammad, peace be upon him, received it from him as a student receives a text from his teacher. So that answers the question of who the teacher is. What he did with it after he received it was, 1, to learn and memorize it, 2, to report and convey it, 3, to explain it, 4, to implement it in practical life. It had nothing to do with the creation of its meanings or the setting of its purpose. It is all an inspiration which was revealed to him, alayhi salatu wasalam. And here, these 4 points, we mentioned them before. These are all 4 points of what is the function of the sunnah, and what also you can say prophethood means, right? That he received the revelation. When we talk about studying the sunnah, we don't talk about this part too much, that Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam gave the Prophet the Quran. But here in this context, again, Sheikh Abdullah Daraz is resetting Islamic studies. He's bringing together the sciences, the Quran, with the sciences of Aqidah, with the sciences of Sunnah. All of those sciences are coming together. So here, he's talking about what is the Quran, and then he goes into making sure that we're clear that the Prophet ﷺ was transmitted to by way of Jibreel. What was transmitted to the Prophet? The Quran. Okay, so what was the function of the Prophet ﷺ when he received this message? What was his task or job with regard to the message that he received from the messenger Jibreel ﷺ? Here, the angels are called Rasul as well, or Rusul. They're called Rusul. So here, Jibreel is a Rasul. He's a messenger. So what did he do with the message? The Prophet Muhammad والسلام, once he received it, one, he learned it and memorized it. It should also say that he learned how to recite it. So here in the Arabic, it says that he became cognizant of it, or conscious of it, or understood it. That his role was al-wa'i wal-hifz. And then the second was al-hikayatu al-tabligh, which is to transmit it and to propagate it, to make sure that people receive it. And al-bayan wa tafsir, and to clarify it, basically. To declare and to clarify it in general sense and in detail. Tadbiq wa tanfidh, right? To put it into practice and execute it. And that, in my opinion, is what we can call the usul of the sunnah, what the sunnah aims at. Is that part clear for everyone or no?
Yes. You were saying about the recitation, to learn, memorize, and recite. And
Yeah, I
then
added the recitation piece because we know that in the first encounter, that's a part of that was being, but recitation has a heavier meaning. It has the meaning of being cognizant of reading as well. But
what does it mean to, or what does it say in Arabic when the English says report and convey?
الحكاية والتبليغ, to transmit, to communicate it or to share it, and then to propagate it, but to make sure that people are reaching the message. Or make sure the message is reaching the people.
Does that fall under dawah?
Yeah.
Like inviting people?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Let's just read this one more page and then we can pause. There are numerous references to this fact in the Quran itself, such as, when you, O Prophet, do not produce any miracle for them, they will say, why do you not seek to have one? Say, I only follow whatever is being revealed to me by my Rabb. Say, it is not for me to alter it. That is the Quran of my own volition, or my own will. I only follow what is revealed to me. Then Sheikh Abdullah Daraz says, there are many other texts that refer to the revelation of the meanings of the Quran. We also have references to its being revealed by word as well. We have sent it down from on high as a discourse in the Arabic tongue. We shall teach you to read, and you shall not forget. Do not move your tongue in haste, repeating the words of revelations, for it is for us to gather it and to cause it to be read. For this reason, when we recite it, follow you its recitation. Then it is for us to make its meaning clear. Everything that was being said earlier is kind of just being explicated here. Sheikh Abdullah Daraz is a master of that. It's like he's not letting us go in terms of he's not, like sometimes when I speak, I'm not 100% accurate in what I'm saying. I'm trying to get the accuracy, so sometimes I'm repeating it in different ways. Sheikh Abdullah Daraz, everything that he's saying is interconnected. It's tightly presented. Right. And so the idea of the Quran being speech and meaning, he's supporting it with the Quran itself here. Right. He's supporting it with the Quran itself. Firstly, he says there are numerous references to this fact in the Quran itself, such as when you, O Prophet, do not produce any miracle for them, they will say, why do you not seek to have one? Say, I only follow whatever is being revealed to me, all right, by my Rabb. Say, it is not for me to alter it. That is the Quran of my own volition. I only follow what is revealed to me. So Sheikh Abdullah Daraz, are you with me? Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay, so he says, there are many other texts that refer to the revelation of the meanings of the Quran. We also have references to its being revealed by word as well. Right. And so then here it says, we have sent it down from on high as a discourse in the Arabic tongue. And that's a very subtle point, because basically that goes back to the definition of the Quran as being that which was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by way of Jibreel in the Arabic language. Right? And the reason why that's important is because if it's just the meanings, then you can say, then any language would be, we can translate the Quran to any language and it would be equivalent to Quran. So then that means the wording would change, but the meaning will stay the same. Right? And that's what we argue that point about hadith. That hadith is the wording of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Even though it may be inspired by Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, it's not the equivalent.
What page
Huh?
What page are you on? I lost you.
I'm on page 36 at the top. Right there. In that section.
There are many other texts that refer to the revelation of the meanings of the Quran.
Yeah, we just finished reading that part. We stopped at we have sent it down from on high as a discourse in the Arabic tongue. We shall teach you to read, and you shall not forget. Do not move your tongue in haste, repeating the words of the revelation, for it is for us to gather it and cause it to be read. In other words, it's not going to be lost, it's going to be preserved. And we're going to show you how to recite it. Thus, when we recite it, follow you its recitation. Then it is for us to make its meaning clear. The Prophet is given instructions, alayhi salatu wasalam, such as read, convey, recite, all in connection with the Quran and its verses. All these verses, as well as moving his tongue in the text, being in Arabic, apply to the wording and the text, not to its meaning.
Mm.
Sheikh Abdul Daraj is masterful in that regard. How tightly he argues it. That's very. You have to be very focused when you're going to
What is
articulate it.
it means?
Huh?
What does he mean when he says it's Arabic in word and text, but not to its meanings? Meaning that it's not directed to Arabs only?
No, he's making a simple claim that the meanings of the Quran the meanings of the Quran and the words of the Quran. Because Allah could have just sent the meanings of the Quran, the senses, or what the Quran indicates to the Prophet ﷺ in his heart. But once the Prophet starts to articulate and recite in the Arabic language the meanings of the Quran and the Arabic language, the words that are in the Arabic language, they come together. You get the idea?
But was it explained to him what the meanings were?
He mentioned that. That's mentioned. Yeah. Then thus, when we recite it, follow you its recitation, then it is for us to make its meaning clear. As the Quran itself is saying that. You see right above.
Yeah. It is
Right
for
above.
us.
Huh?
Yes.
Sheikh Yusuf, how do we understand that with ayat, the mutashabihat? منه آيات محكمات وأخر متشابهات.
What do you mean, the issue of the clarity?
Yes.
The mutashabihat, the way that Dr. Taha Jabir explained it was that they're similar to each other. Even though some people include the huruf muqatta' as mutashabiha, but in reality, even the mutashabihat at that level, there's some, actually you'll be surprised how many opinions there are over huruf muqatta'. The Muslims, what we take a very later day Salafi position on that of just leaving it as it is and that's it. But I think there's like 100 positions on what they mean, those huruf muqatta'. But in general, the mutashabihat from what is that they're similar to each other. But if we take it to mean other than that, then that means that there's in the Quran a gap in understanding. Huruf muqatta is different because it's like huruf muqatta, it's to go into that and debate about its meanings. It's like the Sufis like to do that and others like to do that and give it special meanings and all this type of stuff. But really, reality is simply put, that these are the letters from which the surah is revealed. And some of the Sahaba have their own opinions. So whatever's textually related in that regard, no problem. But as far as the rest of the Quran, the mutashabihat, that they're similar to each other in different ways. And that's where the Quran is open to flexible meanings. It can have more than one meaning as well, and it allows it to be applied in different circumstances and situations. If everything is just clear cut off of the rip, meaning that immediately is just black and white, is going to make the Quran difficult to apply in different times and places, because everything would just be clear cut. So the muhkamat are foundational. They're that which is the foundation of the Quran, is unchanging, and thawabit, as they say. And then the mutashabihat, they allow for other things to kind of come into understanding, because they can be understood in different ways. But they're speaking about the same thing as well. I don't know if that's satisfying as a definition, but That's one of the ways to understand it. For me, that's better than claiming that the mutashabihat are unclear and this like the way that they deal with the Quran in that way. I don't like dealing with the Quran in that way. I take Dr. Taha Jaber's position on this, that the Shabihat, and it's really like that the ayat, some of the ayat of the Quran are similar to each other in meaning. They have subtle differences which make them open to other understandings, but it's not unclear to the point where we're lost as to what they mean, and we're saying, what is this saying? That's it. It's incomprehensible. It's not like the huruf muqatta. That's why the huruf muqatta, to equate them with the mutashabihat, it kind of creates its own problem. And then to make the mutashabihat, or those ayat that are similar to each other, to make them like they're not understandable, is just. But unfortunately, that's what has happened in Quranic studies. The Quranic studies at a certain point took a back seat. It took a back seat. And this is one of the reasons why, that's why Sheikh Abdullah Draz, in this, he's reviving even the sciences of the Quran, because he's showing, no, part of the function of prophethood is al-bayan wa tafsir. And Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhuma, he made the claim that the Prophet, he took the knowledge, of the Quran from beginning to end. So they were making the claim that they were studying the Quran from beginning to end, so nothing was left unclear. That comes up, that only maybe sometimes there was a word or two that was asked, and that's a big difference between to be honest with you, Ibn Taymiyyah takes a really strong position on that the Quran was taught from beginning to end, word by word. And some, they mention that the Quran, there's elements of it that need to be clarified in a more in-depth way. And usually you find that with like the Asharis and others, they say that. And that's part of the reason why you get into that, is because they open up the way for intellectually investigating the Quran at a more in-depth level, whereas the other camp, they use a lot of narrations. And so one camp is like, well, we have an understanding what's being said, at least by way of narration. The other camp says, well, we're not just going to limit ourselves to that. So it's open, but either way, nobody's going to say that the meanings of the Quran are so unclear they can't be understood.
Right.
Yeah, that's it.
Is this safe to say? Is it respectful to say that it's also understood in English?
The meanings in the basic way, in a limited way, foundational way. I would say foundational way, just leave it at that, so that even those who are restricted to the English don't get confused or they despair and they say, well, we're not even reading Quran. That happens sometimes. You see that with them.
Yeah.
They say, how can we even access Quran? But you have to say that because it's not Quran. It's not Quran. Quran is, meanings and words. You have to say that, because when you begin to see the translations differ, you're going to create doubt in the Quran. That's what has happened in Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
So let's read this. Let's finish reading this section then, inshallah. So he says, the Prophet ﷺ is given instructions such as read, convey, recite, all in connection with the Quran and its verses. All these, as well as moving his tongue in the text being in Arabic, applied to the wording and the text, not to its meanings. Right? The Quran states very clearly and unequivocally that neither Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam nor any other creature had anything to do with the composition of the Quran. It was revealed by God in word and meaning. It is very peculiar that some people still require evidence to prove the first part of this question, which is that Muhammad did not write it himself. Had this been the case, looked into by any judge whose sole aim is to establish this truth, the judge would have done no more than to accept this testimony by Muhammad himself. He would not have required any further evidence, material or logical. There is no claim being made here to require irrefutable evidence. It is an admission that is binding on the one who makes it. Neither friend nor foe would hesitate to accept it from him. No rational person who makes a claim to leadership and supports his claim with miraculous events would attribute his finer goods to someone else, disowning them totally and completely. In fact, the opposite is true. His position would be enhanced if he were to claim such goods for himself. Moreover, he would meet no objection to his claim from any person on earth. He's trying to use a legal argument of testimony in saying that, look, why would why wouldn't the Prophet ﷺ say, I wrote the Quran, which he never claimed that? That would have increased his status, amongst everyone.
Right.
But as a matter of fact, he said, no, he wasn't the source of the Quran. And then they started to say that say that he was possessed by a jinn or he was crazy, this type of thing. So let's stop there, page 37.
Okay.
What's today's date?
22nd.
Just think about what was said. I know that it's a little dense. It's dense. It's not that easy. That's why I was like trying to go back, but he's making some solid points. It's forcing us to read the Quran carefully. That's what Sheikh Abdul Daraz is doing. He's forcing us to read the Quran carefully with some understanding, and extract from it points that pertain to Aqidah, more specifically, as the belief pertains to the books, the Quran specifically there, and the prophets, the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, what was his role in relation to the book that he received, which was the Quran. So we're being forced to examine that at a deeper level. And also the angels, because here, the issue of the angels comes to the fore, that the angel of revelation is the one who transmitted the Quran to the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. And that being the case, something else is going to come up later on. Like, did everything that was revealed to the Prophet, was it by way of the angel Jibreel? Think about the whole issue of the Isra wal Miraj. But I'm going to end with that. We ask Allah to forgive us and to guide us and to aid us and to increase us in understanding, and forgive us for our lapses, our sins, intentional and non-intentional. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Yusuf.
All right, assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.